Quite right, the matron said briskly, moving to the newly stripped bed and laying the baby down on it before beginning to wrap him up tightly. The baby started to grumble at that, and Rob wanted to protest, but before he could the matron was done and one of the nurses was handing her a blanket and wrapping it around his newly swaddled son. Actually, Rob found his voice. I had hoped to wrap him in this one. He moved to snatch the blanket Ursula had made from the back of the chair. The matron seemed to stare at him for a long moment before she smiled. Of course, Your Grace, as you wish. In an instant the baby was swapped into the new blanket and the matron scooped him up off the bed, the two nurses immediately descending again to remake it. Rob could not help but be impressed at their efficiency, and he could do nothing but watch their work for a moment or two. He made to move towards the matron then, to reclaim his son, but before he could his mother and Ursula emerged from behind the screen. Ursula looked tired but happy, her robe wrapped loosely around her as his mother supported her towards the bed. Rob smiled at her, though it did not escape his notice that she looked disgruntled at the arrival of the matron and the nurses. He did his best to express his sympathy without saying it outright, and she looked resigned to it as his mother settled her in the bed. Thank you, Lady Stark, she said kindly. Matron, would you be kind enough to pass me my son? Of course, my queen. The matron sounded rather sour, but she handed the baby over to Ursula and then stepped back a few paces. I will come by tomorrow, his mother said as Rob approached the bed. All this is rather overwhelming enough. I will see to it that the feast is a grand one, so do not fret. Thank you, Mother. Rob met her eyes to show her he truly meant it. She seemed to understand him, squeezing his upper arm tightly for a moment before she bent down to kiss Ursula, and then the baby, on the forehead. A few murmurs passed between the two women that Rob could not quite decipher, before his mother was smiling at him once more before making her way from the room. As the door closed behind her, Rob moved to settle himself down on the side of the bed, looking down at Ursula and their son once more. You did wonderfully, he murmured to her. As did you, she responded with a smile, before her eyes slid to the others still gathered. You have been most helpful, she addressed them, her smile more forced now. But you can leave us now. With respect, my queen, we really ought to be here in case you or the prince has need of anything, the matron simpered. Since you are to remain abed for at least a week. Rob could tell that there was an angry retort welling in his wife, so he leant forwards and pressed a kiss to her cheek before whispering in her ear. Humor them. She clearly grit her teeth then, he could hear it. Of course, your most kind, Ursula said instead of whatever she was clearly thinking. If you would all like to take a place by the fire, I will call you over should I have need. They could not argue with that, though Rob could see the matron clearly trying to think of something. In the end, though, she agreed, and she and her flock of nurses made their way over to settle by the fire. Ursula leant her head back against the pillows at their retreat and let out a long breath. They're excited, Rob tried to excuse them. I cannot wait for this week to be over, she whispered to him. Then they will have no excuse to be with me all the time. Honestly, Rob, I just wanted it to be you and me, and our son. It is, he soothed. No one else matters in this moment. Forget they are even here. We need to think of a name for our boy. Is thought really necessary? She asked him with raised brows. What do you mean? He returned, frowning slightly. I would have thought you would name him for your father, she said, eyes wide. Would that be all right with you? He asked awkwardly. Why would it not be? She asked, shaking her head in a slightly bewildered manner. With all the bad blood between our families, he explained, and she shook her head with a smile. Forget that, Ursula said firmly. Your father was a good and kindly man who did not deserve the fate that my brother chose for him. I would be honored to name our son for him, unless it is not what you want. It is what I want more than anything, Rob confessed, his eyes stinging. Then we are agreed, she smiled widely at him, before looking down at their son. Eddard Stark. Eddard began to grumble in the next moment, and Rob inched slightly closer as Ursula rocked him, trying to soothe him. It did no good, his grumbles only intensified, threatening to turn to cries. I think perhaps he must be hungry, Ursula said, her free hand moving to the ties of her nightdress. The matron was there in a flash, one of the nurses stood a step behind her. Rob almost flinched at the suddenness of the movement, he had not even heard them coming. I will take him, my queen, the matron said. Clearly he wants his wet nurse. I can feed him, Ursula almost snarled. It is not seemly, for a queen the matron returned. Besides, you need rest to recover, and you will not get rest with the prince demanding to be fed every few hours. Best he comes to his wet nurse, and you can get all the rest you need to recover properly. I would hate for you to fall ill through exhaustion. Ursula began again, but Eddard's wails intensified, cutting her off. He was nudging his head against her breast, and again she made to untie her nightdress. Your Grace, I really must protest, the matron spoke up again. It is best we take the prince and get him settled in the nursery with his wet nurse. That way it will avoid confusion and the queen will be able to get the rest she desperately needs. Rob was torn. He could see that Ursula really wanted to feed their son herself, but at the same time she really did need her rest. The last thing he wanted was for her to fall sick because she was pushing herself too hard. He bit his lip. It would only be for this week while she was abed, and then he would give her leave to do whatever she wished about the matron and the nurses. First though, he needed her to recover her full strength. Perhaps you should give him to the matron, he murmured to her, and he saw the look of betrayal in her eyes, her bottom lip beginning to tremble. He moved in closer at that, obscuring her face from the matron's view. She's right, you need to rest, he stressed to her. He wants me, Rob, she protested, her voice catching in her throat. And he will have you, a fully recovered you, he persuaded. Just for tonight, at least. Tomorrow we can speak about it properly, and we can spend the whole day here if you like. Just you and me, and our son, what do you think? All right, she said in a defeated tone, a tear slipping down her cheek. Rob took Eddard from her then, and he seemed to scream all the louder on being taken from his mother's arms. Ursula let out a clear sob from behind him and he hated himself for handing the baby to the matron. We will leave the queen to rest, Your Grace, she said in an almost smug manner before marching from the door, the nurses scampering after her. I'm sorry, Rob said in an agonized tone as he turned back to Ursula as soon as the door closed behind them. I know I have to rest, she sobbed. But don't you ever let them take him from me again, Rob. I swear, I cannot bear it. I'm sorry, he said again, crossing to gather her up gently in his arms, part of him imagining that she might just push him away from her. Thankfully she did not. She held him back and cried, and he regretted his decision more and more with every second that passed of her sobbing in his arms. He could do nothing but apologize to her over and over again as he rocked her gently. Eventually she stilled, and he pressed kisses to the top of her head and to her temple as she hiccuped a few times. I only did what I thought was best for you. I want you to be able to look after him properly, Ursula, he told her gently. And right now you are exhausted and what you need more than anything is sleep. I know, she agreed, though he could tell it was grudgingly. But they will not be in charge of what is best for him. If I want my son, I will have him. They cannot expect to protest to you each time and have you overrule me. This will be the only time, I swear, he promised her, and her expression softened. Good, she said, leaning back against the pillows again. Rob smiled at her, shifting himself so he could look down on her, stroking his hand gently through her hair as her eyes began to flutter. You're a wonderful mother to him already, he whispered, and a smile graced her face. I didn't think it would be possible to love you more, to be even more proud of you. I love you, she told him sleepily. And I love you, he returned as she sighed happily, her eyes staying closed this time. Sleep now, he soothed, I will see you in the morning. We both will. She didn't respond this time, and he smiled, leaning carefully closer to press a kiss to her forehead before he rose up from the bed and tiptoed to the door as quietly as he could. Ursula stirred as he opened the latch of the door, but thankfully did not wake. He crept out into the hallway before closing the door behind him almost silently. With that he made his way down the hallway towards the stairs. Halfway down them he could hear the noise of the feast and was impressed that his mother had got it all done so quickly. He made his way down the rest of the stairs, a grin on his face now that was refusing to fade. Entering the hall he was greeted as usual, and was pleased that it appeared few, if any, people knew that the baby had been born. As he approached the high table, though, it became obvious that his mother had told the rest of his family, his siblings all grinning widely at him as he approached. He clapped Bran and Rickon on the back as he passed behind them, thanking them for their whispered congratulations. He ruffled Arya's hair, knowing it annoyed her, though her scowl gave way to a smile as she congratulated him. His mother smiled warmly at him as he stood in front of his own seat and poured a cup of wine. Slowly the occupants of the hall seemed to notice he had not yet sat, and they began rising from their own seats, looking towards him expectantly. His smile felt ready to crack his face as he waited for the last few folk to stand before beginning his announcement. "Good people of Winterfell," he began. "I am sure you can all imagine what I have to announce to you, since the absence of the Queen is telling in itself, and so I will not keep you long as I know you are all hungry. I will only say that it gives me the greatest pleasure to announce that my wife, Queen Myrcella, this day gave birth to our first child. A son. A prince of Winterfell, who I am honored to name here before you, Eddard Stark." The roar was almost deafening, and Robb felt tears well in his eyes again. He could not look at his mother yet, having heard her slight gasp as he had announced the name. She would be pleased, he knew, but it would most likely have stirred her emotions as well. To Eddard Stark Robb raised his cup high now, and those gathered followed his lead. "Prince of Winterfell, and heir to the north. Prince of Winterfell, the called back. And heir to the north." Chapter 35, XXXI, Motives. Notes. Hey everyone. I'm so glad I haven't kept you all waiting so long again. Just want to say thank you so much for all the comments that you left on the last chapter, and a big thanks to one person who has recently found this story and left a comment on every chapter. I appreciate it so much, so huge thanks to everyone for taking the time to leave some comment. Hope you enjoy the new chapter. Happy Smiley. Chapter text. Myrcella. She felt as though she had been gritting her teeth for the best part of the week. This was not how she had imagined it being after the baby was born. Instead of being absorbed in her baby, as she had wanted, it seemed as though everything was conspiring to keep him from her. Despite Robb's promise, they had not managed to spend a day together with their son. Though, it was not her husband's fault, but the Maester's orders. Myrcella had woken in the small hours, the day after Eddard was born, sweat drenching her and her vision blurred. Vaguely she remembered Robb's hands on her shoulders, the back of his hand pressed against her forehead, and his panicked voice calling out for the Maester. He had come quickly and soon came to the conclusion that a fever was upon her. The worry was that she had an infection from childbirth. Myrcella was not stupid, she had known that meant she could die. Her worst fears seemed to be coming to fruition, but then, almost as soon as it had come, the fever had broken. Robb had been beside himself, kneeling at her bedside and thanking the gods over and over as he pressed kisses to her hand. She still felt weak, only able to stomach a thin broth and water. The Maester was pleased with her, though he had been strict about her being kept away from her son. That had frustrated her more than the fever, which had been gone for 3 days now. She was hoping that when the Maester came today he would lift the ban on her seeing Eddard. She was desperate for him. Her breasts ached, milk leaking from them almost constantly. She could also hear his cries through the walls, which broke her heart. She wanted her boy, her precious baby, back in her arms where she could see for herself that she was safe. Robb assured her he was fine, and she tried her best not to be resentful of him for the time he could spend with their son. Her husband always had such a sparkle in his eyes when he returned from the nursery, and Myrcella quietly seethed each time. It was cruel of her. She did not want to deny her son both of his parents, but gods, she missed him. The matron, Hadar, had started coming daily to give Myrcella updates on how well Eddard was doing. She did this when Robb was away from their chambers, and Myrcella hated staring at her smug face as she explained that her son was thriving. The way the woman spoke, it was as though Eddard was better off with her and the nurses than he would be with Myrcella. Myrcella had no doubt that the woman was glad that she had been sick, so she could keep her baby from her. Perhaps it was paranoia, but she could not shake the fear. In the end she was ready to snap, but somehow she kept herself calm and asked Hadar if she would send Jan to her in the future, as she would rather the matron stayed in the nursery with the prince. Hadar had agreed, and Myrcella was thrilled with her own excuse. At least she would not have to put up with smugness from Jan, hopefully. She sighed and leaned further back down against the pillows. If the gods were good, she would be allowed out of her bed tomorrow, and then nothing and no one would be able to stop her from seeing her son. Hadar and her nurses, and anyone else, could all burn in the 7 hells if they even thought to stop her. Her fists clenched as she thought that, her teeth grinding again. A knock sounded at the door then, and she forced herself to relax, bringing what she hoped to be a serene smile to her face. She would not let anyone see how much this was affecting her. "Come," she called out to her visitor. Unsurprisingly it was the maester, and he smiled at her as he entered, closing the door behind him. Myrcella returned his smile as he approached the bed. "How are you feeling today, my queen?" he asked her kindly, coming to a halt at her bedside. "Very well," she told him. It was true. Aside from being frustrated beyond belief at being stuck here in this room, she felt in perfect health. "You certainly have more color," the maester commented, the back of his hand coming gently to her forehead. "And no more clamminess. Have you managed your meals?" "Yes," she confirmed. "It has been wonderful to have something other than broth." "Good," he smiled indulgently as that, and she beamed back. "Please, let me up." "So, do you think I am well enough to come from my bed tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. "If you promise me you will not overexert yourself." He looked at her pointedly. "The only thing I wish to do is visit the nursery and hold my son," she told him, meeting his eyes. "Then, I am delighted to allow you up." The maester bowed shortly. "Thank you," she told him meaningfully, and he smiled again. "I will leave you in peace, my queen," he said. "Make sure you still continue to get plenty of rest." "I will," she promised him, and he bowed once more before retreating from the room. Myrcella sighed when she was left alone once again, turning her head and eyeing the book on the side table. She had been trying to read it for the past few days. Bran had brought it for her, sure it would be something she would enjoy. No doubt he was right, but she was just unable to concentrate on it, barely managing a few pages so far. She turned away from it, drumming her fingers on the bed and hating the fact that time seemed to be moving so slowly. It was tempting to get up right now. What difference would it make? It was late afternoon now, and in the morning she was allowed up, so why not now? Just to move from the bed would be wonderful. Just as she decided that moving to the chair in front of the fire would be perfectly acceptable and begun to push back her covers, the doorknob turned and she hurriedly drew the covers up again. It was Rob, and he beamed at her as he slipped through the door, keeping it slightly ajar behind him. "I just saw the maester on my way up," he said, his tone telling her he had heard the good news. "I cannot wait for tomorrow," she told him honestly. "I know," he nodded, looking at her with slight concern. "I'm fine," she assured him. "I know that too." His demeanor brightened. "I have a surprise for you. You have dismissed the matron and her flock." "What's that?" she asked curiously. "See for yourself," he smiled, stepping aside and opening the door wide. For a moment, all Myrcella could do was stare, and then finally her mind believed what her eyes were showing her. "Etta," she almost screamed, and her old handmaiden beamed, half running towards her bedside. Myrcella pushed the covers away then, and pulled herself up further, her arms outstretched to the woman she had been missing for so long. Only now she had seen her again did she realize quite how much she had been missing her. Etta came into her embrace and Myrcella held on to her tightly, tears spilling from her eyes. "Gods, I've missed you," Myrcella almost choked out. "How are you here?" she pulled away, looking at her in disbelief. "How did you get here in the midst of winter?" "The snows melted in the south many moons ago," Etta told her, her cheeks shining with tears of her own as she reached forwards to tuck a lock of Myrcella's hair behind her ear. "And they are melting swiftly here," Rob added in amusement from the door. "You did this?" She gazed wide-eyed at her husband. "When?" "I wrote to your brother a while ago," he told her. "But you didn't say anything." She shook her head disbelievingly. "I didn't want to get your hope up, in case Etta was delayed in her journey, or if she could not come at all," Rob explained to her. "But you did, you came." Myrcella turned back to Etta, beaming. "Of course I did, I was so pleased when the king came to me personally to ask." She smiled. "I am only sorry I did not get here before the prince arrived. I wish I could have been here for you. It happened so quickly." "It does not matter, you are here now." Myrcella gripped her hand. "So, you like your surprise?" Rob asked. "Very much." She beamed at him. "It is the best surprise I could have asked for." Etta stayed with Myrcella when Rob went to dinner. He had been dining with her since she had taken ill, but now she was better and had a companion with her. He felt it time he showed his face in the dining hall. Myrcella had encouraged him to go. As much as she loved her husband, she wanted to spend some time with her oldest friend. To hear all the gossip from King's Landing. While she exchanged many letters with Tommen, her brother had never been one for gossip. He had more important things to worry about. Etta was brushing Ursula's hair through as she nibbled on a piece of lemon cake. Ursula had been astounded when Lady Stark had brought it up for her. Apparently everything in Dawn was fruitful once more, and a ship had docked in White Harbor carrying all kinds of foods that they had not had in so long. Lemon cakes were Lady Stark's favorite, and she had ordered some baked at once. Ursula had always preferred orange, but it had been so long since she had had any kind of fruit that the cake tasted heavenly. Your hair could use a wash, Etta told her as she continued to brush. Perhaps I could call for some water for a bath. And afterwards I could set it in rags for you, enhance your curls. I always did envy your hair. Mine is so dull and straight, no matter how many times I tried I could never get it to curl more than a little at the end. Yes, Ursula agreed. A bath would be most welcome. Would you call for one tonight? I do not want to waste any time tomorrow. Of course, Etta said. What plans do you have tomorrow, my queen? I want to see my son. It seems like an age since I last held him in my arms. Ursula could hear the longing in her own voice, and Etta stopped brushing her hair, placing the brush down on the side table before moving round and settling herself down in front of her. You were sick, it's not your fault, Etta soothed her, and she nodded. In truth, she hesitated a moment. I just want him away from the nurses. Why? Etta asked her with a frown. Because I am certain that they hate me, Ursula said, finally admitting it out loud. Have you told the king? Etta asked her, concern evident on her features. Ursula had never adored her more than she did in that moment. Etta had believed her at once, with no questions or interrogations. I have no proof, Ursula scowled. So Etta shrugged. You're the queen, and his wife. He ought to believe what you say. If you don't want them here, then you ought to just get rid of them. I can't do that, Ursula shook her head. Why not? Etta asked, frowning. Because that is something my mother would do, Ursula told her calmly. It has taken so long for the people to start to accept me, even now I know not all of them have. If I just dismiss them, with no proper reason, then they will all start to whisper behind their hands again. The matron and the nurses are from the north, the people will not take kindly to their own people being mistreated. But it sounds as though they are mistreating you, Etta said, clasping her hand. Ursula shook her head, and her friend sighed. It sounds as though there is only one thing that you can do then. What's that? Ursula looked at her, something akin to hope stirring inside her. We get proof, Etta said firmly, and Ursula smiled widely. That's simple, she said with a raised brow. They don't know you're getting out of bed tomorrow, do they? Etta asked her. No, Ursula replied, they have absolutely no idea. Etta helped her dress and fixed her hair up the next morning. Ursula was grateful as her legs were a little shaky after being abed for so long. She scrutinized herself in the mirror as Etta slipped the last few pins into her hair to keep it in place. The maester was right, she did have some more color back in her cheeks, though she did still look a little pale. Likely it was just because she had not been outside in so long. Still, all that could change today. She could leave her chamber and visit her son, and go outside and breathe the fresh air into her lungs. Gods, she could not wait. Done, she asked Etta almost impatiently. Yes, Etta replied. Come on then, let's get you out of here. Ursula grinned at her, standing up from the dressing table and making her way to the door. On the way down the hallways she saw several of the servants. Instead of the averted eyes she was used to, the cold eyes from some, she received warm smiles and blessings of good health. It made her hold her head up higher and feel much better about her position as she made her way towards the nursery. When she reached the door she wanted to walk right in and take her son up in her arms. She wanted to take him from that room and never let him return there again. She wanted him to herself. Surely that was her right after all the days without him. Instead, though, she forced herself to pause as she noticed that the door was ajar and voices were floating out. She stepped closer, gesturing at her to be quiet as she moved herself closer to the gap in the door to hear what was being said. I suppose you will be off to visit the Queen, soon, one scathing voice said. I expect so. Ursula recognized Jan's meek tones. Best friends, are you? Another sneered. You always seem to spend such a long time in her company, came another drawl. She is concerned for her son, Jan said slightly defiantly, and Ursula felt a surge of affection towards her. Perhaps they were not all bad. Why? The matron's voice snapped then. Well, I imagine, because he is her child, Jan stammered. He is a child of the north. A prince of Winterfell, the matron stated angrily. Yes, Myrcella had to strain to hear Jan's response. Not a southern brat, another voice said, and Myrcella bristled. That did it. Myrcella drew herself up to her full height and glanced at Etta, who nodded encouragingly. With that she pushed open the door and stepped through, taking immense satisfaction in the looks on the faces of 4 of the women present. Jan just averted her eyes, shrinking back against one of the walls as though to hide herself from Myrcella's heated gaze. My queen, the matron seemed to recover first, dropping into a hasty curtsy which the other women were quick to emulate. We were not expecting you today, this early. She was definitely flustered, and Myrcella took a moment to enjoy it. I came to see my son, since the Maester has declared me to be in perfect health, Myrcella said sweetly, striding purposefully towards the cradle. No one spoke up to stop her, though she could practically feel them all exchanging glances behind her back. Myrcella decided, as she bent down to scoop up her son, that she would allow them all a moment to imagine that she had not heard a word of their exchange. Perhaps it was petty, but they had made her miserable, and she wanted to enjoy this moment. Is he feeding well? Myrcella asked, turning back to face them as she rocked her son gently. Very well, the matron's curt manner seemed to be returning. He is very attached to his wet nurse, and the Maester is very pleased with the way he is thriving. Wonderful. Myrcella gave them her most dazzling smile before she looked down at her son, a real, genuine smile of affection taking over as she gazed at him. He was so beautiful. Bigger now, than when she had held him after his birth, but all his features still so recognizable. His eyes were the most striking, turning more blue now. She was certain then that he would have his father's eyes. You will all, with the exception of Jan, pack away your things and prepare to return to White Harbor, Myrcella said quietly as she continued to rock Eddard, her eyes not leaving him as he clenched his little fists and squirmed slightly in his blankets. My queen, the matron stammered, her eyes bulging slightly. Did I say something that you did not understand? Myrcella asked, finally raising her head to look at them and seeing Etta standing in the background grinning encouragingly. She tightened her hold on her son and turned her eyes to the matron in a challenging manner. Is the prince not a little young for traveling? The matron asked. The king made no mention that he was planning to foster him so early. The prince will be staying here, in his rightful place, Myrcella smiled sweetly. But, then, the matron was definitely flustered now. You seem confused, Hadar, Myrcella said innocently. Well, yes, I must confess, my queen, she said. I wonder why we should be dismissed in such a manner. The king seemed most pleased with the care we are taking of the prince. Yes, Myrcella nodded. But I do not think he would be so pleased about the way you have been discussing his wife. My queen, she flushed. The next time you speak that way about your mistress, you should think to close the door properly, Myrcella said, her tone icy now. Yes, my son is the Prince of Winterfell and he is of the north, as his father is. However, he is also my son, and whether you like it or not I am from the south, but that does not make my son a brat and it does not mean you can freeze me out of his life. He will be raised according to the customs of both of his parents, and I need to know that his nurses will respect that. You, clearly do not, so you will prepare to leave and I will see to it that a carriage is prepared for you for the morning. With that, Myrcella made her way towards the door, Etta's smile now almost splitting her face as she approached. Etta opened the door up for her and winked as she made to pass through it. She paused, however, and turned back, her eyes finding January. Jan, would you care to join us? Myrcella asked her, and the young woman nodded, despite the icy stares of the other women surrounding her. My queen, I really must protest, Hadar began. Then you can protest to the king, I have nothing else to say to you, Myrcella said with finality before she strode through the door, Etta and Jan quick on her heels. She could hear an explosion of voices from the nursery, and she couldn't help but smirk. Part of her was a little worried that Rob would be angry with her for her rash action, but she had her reasons, and as soon as her husband heard them he would be on her side. She knew it. Besides, now Jan was free of the others, she was sure the girl would speak far more openly. She would get the full truth of the matron's motives one way or another. Once back in her chambers she asked Etta to get some wine, and indicated for Jan to take a seat next to the fire. The girl looked nervous, her cheeks pale and her eyes darting around the room. She sat though, moving her shaking hands to lay in her lap as she continued to glance around. Etta placed a cup of wine in front of her in the next moment, and Ursula moved to take the seat opposite her. "You're not in trouble, Jan," Ursula told her, meeting her eyes. "I was afraid," Jan blurted out. "They are all so much older than I am. They said I was in a position of privilege and if I didn't do what I was told then I would never be able to serve in a highborn household again. I could not risk being disgraced, my queen. I am sorry, but my family would have been so ashamed of me if I had lost this position." "You have not lost your position," Ursula soothed. "You shall be in charge of the prince's care, along with Etta, when I have other duties to attend to. You showed me kindness in there, Jan, even with them all standing against you. That was brave. My son will learn a lot from you." "You are too kind, my queen." Tears were streaking down Jan's face now. "Hush now, there is no need for tears," Ursula told her kindly. "They will be gone come morning, and you have nothing else to fear. Your position is safe. I only ask that you explain to me exactly what the matron had planned for my son." "She thought it best he was raised as far apart from you as possible," Jan said, voice barely more than a whisper as she stared down at her hands. She didn't want the southern influence infecting him, since, she seemed unable to continue. "Since my mother," Ursula said bitterly, and Jan nodded her head before staring back down at her hands again. "I tried to say you were kindly, but they were so certain that it was an act," Jan told her desperately. "I understand, Jan," Ursula told her, feeling deflated. "Wine, my queen." Etta practically forced the cup into her hand. "This isn't your fault. If they cannot see how kindly and fair you are then they are clearly far too blind and ignorant to be allowed to look after a child as precious as the prince. You have done the right thing. I hope Rob sees it that way." Ursula frowned, worrying at her bottom lip. "The king ought to believe you above all others," Etta said firmly. "I will tell him what they planned, my queen, if you like." Jan looked up. "Yes, perhaps," Ursula said faintly, glancing down at Eddard for a moment before she took a sip of the wine that Etta had brought her. "The most important thing is you have the prince away from their influence before he was old enough to remember any of their poison," Etta told her, her hand clasping her shoulder tightly. "Yes," Ursula nodded determinedly, her steely resolve returning. "Yes, you're right, the gods only know what they would have said about me to him as he grew. I could not have borne it if they had managed to turn him against me. Now, thanks to your action, that will never happen," Etta soothed her. "Yes," Ursula agreed. "Yes, he is under my care now, and I will not allow anyone to falsely influence him. Not now, and not ever. My son deserves far better than that." Chapter 36, Xxi, settled. Notes. Apologies for the wait, guys. Honestly, time has run away with him and I can't quite believe how long it's been since I updated. My excuse is I've been busy with work, and the small matter of growing a new person. I do hope to try and get this story finished before the little person appears, or at least almost finished. Anyway, I want to thank you all for the kudos and the comments you've left in my absence. It's much appreciated, I can't tell you how much. Love to you all, hope you enjoy this one. Happy Smiley. Chapter text. Rob. He was utterly bewildered. They had come in like a storm. Tu had been sobbing uncontrollably and Hadar had appeared to be shaking with suppressed rage as she told Rob that she and her mates had been dismissed. His head was spinning with the news that Ursula had made such a decision and he finally managed to get out that he would speak with her. He sent Hadar and her mates to wait in one of the parlors and sat still at his desk for a long moment, trying to get his head around what he had just been told. Despite what had been said, he could not imagine Ursula taking such drastic action without good reason. Hadar claimed to be completely ignorant as to why his wife had suddenly decided to be rid of her and the maids. It was only now, as he sat alone, that he realized that one of the maids had not been present. Was her name Jan? He thought it might be. Remembering back, he recalled that Ursula had told him once that though Jan seemed shy, she also seemed the most kindly. Perhaps his wife had not dismissed all the maids, as he had been led to believe. He was now coming to realize that there was far more to this, and the only way he would get to the bottom of it was by speaking with Ursula. Rob rose up from his chair and made his way slowly out of his study. The last thing he wanted to do was upset his wife by sounding accusing, but he did need to know why she had dismissed them without speaking to him about it first. It was very unlike her. Now he was really thinking about it, and it made him even more certain that she must have a very good reason. Gods! He hoped those women had not allowed any harm to come to his son. As that thought came into his head, he took the steps 2 at a time and half ran down the hallways towards his and Merciless chambers. On reaching the door he almost fell through it, heart pounding wildly in his chest. Mercilla looked up with wide eyes at his entrance, and he almost forgot his reason for coming when he set eyes on her. She looked radiant again, no longer pale and sickly. Her hair was shining and set beautifully, and to complete the image of perfection she was cradling their son in her arms as he fed contentedly from her breast. He blinked stupidly, trying to remember why he had come. Mercilla seemed to know though, and she shifted slightly in her seat, biting her lip gently before she spoke. "You've seen the nurses," she said quietly, eyes set on him. "Yes," he responded calmly. She nodded, glancing at Etta and Jan before she looked back towards him, clearly trying to gauge his mood. "Etta, Jan," she spoke after a moment of appraising him. "Would you please take Ned back to the nursery and settle him? He seems to have finished feeding, and I'm sure he is ready to sleep." "Of course, my queen." Etta came forward to ease Ned carefully from Mercilla's arms as Jan darted past him to the door, holding it open as Etta bustled past and out. Before he could say anything the door was closed behind them and he was alone with his wife. Mercilla stood then, smoothing her skirts before lifting her head and meeting his eyes. "I suppose you want to know why I did it," she said. "It would be nice," he replied. "I thought you would have discussed it with me first." "I would have done, but I was so angry, I had to," she told him. "Did something happen with Ned?" he asked her anxiously, stepping closer. "No, that's why I dismissed them, before something did," she replied. "I don't understand," he frowned, grasping hold of her upper arms gently. "I believe they had intentions to keep him from me as much as possible," she told him, meeting his eyes. "They were speaking about me in such a dismissive manner, and, well, they said that Ned was a northern child and not a southern brat. They did not want him influenced by me, and so I do not wish him influenced by them. I want them gone. I trust Ned will be well cared for by Etta and Jan when I am doing my duties." "Gods, Mercilla," he shook his head before pulling her into an embrace, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You did the right thing. They are only lucky I did not hear this firsthand, or they may well have found themselves in a cell rather than in a carriage back to White Harbor. People will talk." She sounded fearful as she pulled back slightly. "And I will correct them, be sure of that," he said. "They ought to know by now that I will not tolerate disrespect to my queen. This only proves that not everyone has accepted me," she sighed. "You will never gain the approval of everyone," he smiled widely at her. "Do you really think every northerner approves of me? So long as we hold the approval of the majority our family will remain in favor, but I think it impossible to be loved by everyone." "I suppose you are right," Mercilla smiled back at him. "It has been known to happen," he chuckled. "Thank you for believing me," she told him seriously. "I'm your husband." He held her eyes. "I will always believe you." Mercilla was insistent on seeing the matron and her nurses leave with her own eyes. Rob was wary of her health, but knew better than to deny her, only insisting that she must wrap up warmly. Winter was definitely subsiding now. Any snow flurries that came were short and light, and rarely settled. On the rare occasion snow did build up on the ground, it quickly melted away. There were only a stubborn few inches left now, not enough to impede horses or carts anymore. Rob imagined that there would soon be a raven from Old Town declaring that winter was officially over. Following that, he imagined there would be an invite from the capital. He expected it, but was not looking forward to it. The only good that would come from it would be Mercilla's happiness on seeing her brother again. He turned his head to observe his wife as they crossed the entrance hall side by side. She looked beautiful in a green woolen dress that brought out her eyes, fine grey furs draped about her shoulders and the delicate gloves he had bought her many moons ago adorning her hands. Seeing her hands encased in them reminded him of the snow fight they had had. They had all been so carefree and happy that day. Sometimes he wished they could go back and stay in that moment forever. It could not be though, and despite the tensions that still lingered between Mercilla, himself and Arya, he now had a perfect son, and he would never wish him away. Not for the world. He reached out and took his wife's hand as they approached the doors, the guards opening them wide to allow them through. They both voiced their thanks as they passed through. The doors promptly closed behind them as they made their way down the steps. Rob had insisted that the matron and nurses spend the night in the inn in Wintertown, not wanting them in the keep any longer. Their carriage was waiting by the gate, and Ursula tugged on his hand slightly, letting him know that she would lead the way. He happily allowed her to take them up onto the ramparts, walking along the top of them until they came level with the carriage. She came to a halt then, her hand squeezing his slightly as they watched Hadar lead her flock back through the gates. The dismissed matron seemed to look about her warily before she ushered the maids up into the carriage. She then looked about again, this time finding him and Ursula on the ramparts. Instead of looking at Hadar, he looked at his wife, seeing her eyes set and narrowed on the disgraced matron. It seemed that Hadar gave up first, turning her head to the ground before hauling herself up into the carriage. He looked at Ursula again and saw a satisfied smile on her face as she watched the carriage begin to roll away. Rob squeezed her hand reassuringly, proud of her reaction. In that moment he truly appreciated that she was a real queen, and he was thrilled to be able to call her his queen. He moved closer, pressing a kiss to her temple as she watched the carriage disappear into the distance. "And good riddance," Ursula murmured as he pulled her even closer. "May I insist you return to the keep?" Rob asked her in an amused tone. "Only if I in turn can insist you accompany me to the nursery," she smiled up at him. Gladly he responded, leaning in and capturing her lips. Her smile was even wider when he pulled away, and it was infectious, tugging on his own lips in the next moment. She allowed him to lead her away then, her hand still clasped in his as they made their way across the ramparts and down the steps into the courtyard. The guards opened the doors again for them as they approached, and again they voiced their thanks as they walked into the entrance hall and made for the main stairs. They ambled happily towards the nursery, Ursula insistent that he fill her in on all the news she had missed in the last few weeks as they made their way there. She was particularly pleased to hear that Ada's eldest boys were enjoying their time in the tiltyard with Arya. They lowered their voices as they came upon the nursery, aware that Ned may well be sleeping. As they entered, Rob sent a smile to Jan, who appeared to be alone. Likely Etta was on some errand or other for Ursula. He knew his wife trusted her old handmaiden more than any other attendant she had here at Winterfell, and he knew he had made the right decision to write to Tommen and ask him to have her sent here. "Where is Etta?" Ursula enquired as she let go of his hand and approached the cradle. "She went to the seamstress to enquire about new swaddling," Jan reported. "The little prince is growing so swiftly he will soon need larger cloths. The maester is most pleased with him." Ursula's response was almost a coo as she leant over the cradle. From her action Rob could only assume their son was awake, and so he moved closer himself. Ned was indeed awake, an inquisitive look on his face as he kicked at his blankets. "Will your graces be staying a while?" Jan asked. "Yes, I imagine so. I always hate to leave when he's awake," Ursula answered. "Then I will take the laundry down to the kitchens, with your permission." Jan responded. "Yes, of course." Ursula smiled, and Jan moved to pick up the basket and Rob moved to open the door for her. She thanked him as she passed through, bobbing into a little curtsy on her way through. He closed the door behind her and approached Ursula again, placing his hand on the small of her back as they both gazed down into the cradle. "I swear he looks more like you every day," she commented, and he couldn't help but grin. It was true, he could not deny it. Ned was his very image, his hair the exact shade and now his eyes too gaining his coloring. "Such a handsome boy," Ursula cooed, her fingers stroking down the back of one of his little hands. "I cannot help but take that as a compliment to myself," Rob said teasingly, and she laughed. "Yes, you are most handsome, my dear husband," she returned in a similar tone. It was his turn to chuckle at that, his smile widening as he watched Ned grip onto one of Ursula's fingers. "That's quite a grip he has there," he commented, his own hand coming to settle lightly on top of his son's head for a moment. "Strong indeed," Ursula agreed with him proudly. "He will be grasping a sword in no time," he continued. "I can only hope he will never have to use one as much as his father did," she said seriously. "So do I," he agreed. "I like to think I fought all those wars so he would not have to." "Quite," Ursula said happily, smiling at him for a moment before returning her attention to Ned. "I expect we will be expected to visit the capital soon," he commented, watching her reaction carefully and seeing her stiffen. "I thought you would want to go, To see Tommen again, he said gently, rubbing her back lightly. And it pained him to say it, and your uncles. Tyrion will be at the Rock, she said, her tone almost cold. The kin Jaime, he corrected himself quickly, will be there though, won't he? Yes, and so will my mother. There was definitely ice in her tone now. Myrcella, look at me, he coaxed gently. She obeyed him after a moment, and he determinedly met her eyes. Your mother cannot harm us. For one thing, your grandfather is there, and he may not like me, but he knows damn well that he'd have another war on his hands should anything befall me at the capital. Your mother may hate me, but she would have to be mad indeed to think to touch me. Please don't worry, just think how pleased you will be to see your brother once more. Perhaps you could even put it to him that he might visit Winterfell when summer truly begins. Yes, she nodded, her smile looking slightly forced. Yes, that's a wonderful idea, thank you. There is no need to thank me, he smiled back. I would do anything to ensure your happiness, anything at all. Robb found himself in his study a few days later. He would rather we cozied up in his chambers with Myrcella and Ned, but he had been neglecting his correspondence since the birth of his son and Myrcella's illness and could not put it off any longer. While news had been sent to the capital, his mother had seen to that he still had to send the announcement of his son's birth to his own lords here in the north and those in the Riverlands. He also wanted to write to Jon. It had been far too long since he had written him a proper letter, and also to Theon. His mood was so joyous that he did not find the endless writing tedious. He was also getting it into his head that he might throw a tourney when all the snows melted. A celebration of the new prince, and hope for a long summer. He pondered it as he wrote his letters, so absorbed in his task that he didn't hear his mother enter the room until she spoke up. I do not think I have seen you this happy in a long time. Her tone was amused, though he jumped slightly on hearing her. Perhaps ever, she continued, a broad smile on her face that crinkled her eyes. I cannot think of much that has ever made me this happy, he agreed with her. Do you have time to share a drink with your mother, she asked him. Or have you too much work to do? I am never too busy to share a drink with you, mother, he smiled easily, and she crossed to the side table to pour them both a drink of wine as he finished the letter he was working on. He was stamping the seals when she approached, placing the glasses down before taking the seat on the opposite side of the desk. He watched her for a moment when he set his letter aside, seeing her gazing in an almost wistful manner around the room. It's almost as though he has just left for a moment, isn't it? He said softly as he watched her. She smiled, nodding her head, and he could see the tears welling in her eyes. It's hard to believe it has been so many years, she sighed. I know, he agreed softly, reaching out and picking up his glass. To father, he said simply, raising it to her. To Ned, his mother almost whispered, knocking her glass against his before taking a long drink. Now, she said almost briskly when she lowered her glass. I did not come here to speak of the past. How is Myrcella? I wish I could have visited her more, but there has been so much to do. She is perfectly well again, thank the gods, Robb told her, unable to disguise the relief in his voice. And she asked me to thank you for taking on her duties, and I must thank you for trying to keep up with mine as well. I promise, things will go back to normal now, so you will have far more time to visit your grandson. Thank you, Robb, she said sincerely. I do hope we will soon see Sansa as well. That would be most welcome, he agreed with her, thinking of how much his nieces had likely grown since they had last visited. Though I am soon expecting an invitation from the capital. Yes, her expression darkened. Yes, I imagine you will. How do you feel about it? I feel I have precious little choice, he confessed. It has been many years since I stepped foot in the place, and I have had winter as an excuse. Now, though, well, I do not relish the thought, but at least I know that I'll have Myrcella at my side when I return. And how does she feel about it? His mother asked, concern etched on her features. She's wary. He didn't see the point in lying, his mother could always tell. Of her mother, more than anything, but she is glad to know she will see her brother again. Oh, the things I would say to Cersei Lannister given the chance. Nothing made his mother sound so venomous than talk of Cersei. Especially now, knowing what she has done to that poor, sweet girl. A woman like that does not deserve such beautiful children as Tommen and Myrcella. No, Robb agreed, taking a long drink from his own glass. Will you take Ned? His mother asked. We must, Robb replied. It will be expected. Besides, I cannot imagine Myrcella would want to be parted from him for so long, and if I am honest, neither do I. I can understand that her eyes were soft on his. Your father only ever mentioned you being fostered elsewhere once. I would not hear of it. If I am honest, I think he was hoping I would refuse. I know he was stern, and tough at times, but he loved you all. I know. Rob nodded. I only hope I can be to my son what he was to me. You will be a wonderful father, you already are, his mother assured him. Thank you, mother, he told her sincerely. There's something I've been meaning to speak to you about, she said after a long moment, looking slightly wary. It didn't seem like the right time before, but now that Myrcella is better and Ned is thriving. What is it, mother? He asked, amused despite himself. It's Arya, she began, and these plans you are considering for her. I wonder, do you really think that now is the best time for her to be married? What with everything that's happened, it's just, do you not think you and Myrcella should make a real peace with her before she has to go elsewhere? Do you not think she might be happier elsewhere? He asked in turn. She's not as strong as she appears to be, she implored. And she is thriving here, especially now she is training those boys. If she is sent away to be married, then she will have to give that up. Perhaps, he sighed heavily, his mother had a point. But, mother, you know it is past time that she was married. The Lords mention it at every council we have. With Bran unable to have children and Sansa only having daughters so far. But you have a son now, his mother cut in. And you are forgetting Rickon. You have plenty heirs at your disposal, Rob, without pushing Arya into a marriage before she is ready. Please, Rob, she is regaining her happiness, and in time I think she and Myrcella could be truly friendly with one another again. Please, just hold off for a while longer, I beg you. Very well, he sighed in defeat, but when it gets to the point that Rickon is ready to be married, then you know I will not be able to put it off any longer. You understand that, don't you? Yes, and when that day comes I will support you entirely, she promised him. But in the meantime I just want Arya to be truly settled here. She deserves that, you all do. I know she does, Rob agreed, and she will be, I promise. So, Arya is no longer to be married? Myrcella raised her brows at him as they lay facing one another, Ned between them gurgling happily and waving his limbs around, clearly elated to be free of his swaddling for a while. She will be, Rob corrected her. It is only put off, perhaps for another year or so. Perhaps it's for the best, Myrcella sighed, tickling at Ned's tummy. She may be of an age to marry, but, I don't know, she just doesn't seem ready for it. It isn't what she wants. No, Rob agreed, watching her with a slight frown on his face. But, well, I don't suppose you were ready either. I don't suppose it was what you wanted. Not at first, perhaps, she agreed with him. But my apprehension was not lasting. I suppose all girls feel nervous before such a great change in their lives, but some handle it better than others. And you don't suppose Arya would handle it well at all, he guessed. Do you? She countered, and he smiled slightly. No, I suppose not, he said. Arya is so stubborn that she would likely hate her marriage whether it was happy or not, just to spite me. She adores you really, Myrcella soothed him. I've disappointed her, though, he sighed. It happens, she said. It is as you said the other day, you can never please everyone all of the time. You use my own words against me, wife, he mock scolded her, and she smiled. Just reminding you of your own wisdom, husband, she returned teasingly. He smiled in response, watching her intently as she turned her attention back to their son. There was nothing he enjoyed more than watching them together. Sometimes he let himself into their rooms so quietly that she wouldn't hear him. He could watch them together, then wonder over the adoration on Myrcella's face as she completely absorbed herself in their baby. She was a wonderful mother, and more than ever he could not believe that she had ever been worried that she would be awful, as his mother had been. More so, he could not believe that he had ever feared that she would be a younger version of Cersei, sent to him to make his life a misery. You're staring, she said in an amused tone, without looking up. I can't help it, he returned, unabashed. Myrcella. Yes, she asked, attention back on him now. Are you settled here, he asked, thinking about what his mother had said about Arya. Of course, she looked utterly bewildered at his question. Why would you ask that? I just wanted to be sure, he said. We may not have had a perfect start, Robb Stark, but I would not wish to be anywhere else in the world, she assured him. Winterfell is my home now, and I love being here. I love you. I love your family, and I love the family we have started. Of course I'm settled, don't ever let me hear you ask such a ridiculous question again. Forgive me, he grinned. I suppose that sometimes I cannot believe our luck. Believe it, she said firmly. We're happy, Rob, and I will let nothing spoil our happiness. Nothing. Chapter 37, Interlude, Warning. Notes. Thank you everyone for all your comments, you're all so lovely. Sorry that this is a shorter chapter, but we're just diving to the capital for a quick snippet. Normal length will resume next time around. Hope you enjoy. Happy Smiley. Chapter text. Cersei. She knew why she had been summoned. Jaime was there too when she entered. There was little she had to say to him these days, not since he had betrayed her. She glowered at him. Without him she would have her daughter back here and safe by now. Without him Tommen would be the ruler of Westeros in its entirety, instead of him being denied two of his rightful kingdoms. Thankfully they were joined in the parlor before Jaime had a chance to speak to her. Her father and Tommen entered together, clearly having returned from council. She quashed the urge to scowl, still despising the fact that she was no longer invited to their meetings. Jaime, Cersei, her father greeted curtly, taking a seat to the immediate right to Tommen, who seated himself at the head of the table. Wine, he called to the serving girl, and she came forward immediately, pouring each of them a healthy measure. I suppose there has been some news. Jaime raised a brow, reclining easily in his chair. Indeed, Tommen, their father turned to her son. From Winterfell, most joyous news. Tommen smiled heartily. He looked genuinely thrilled, if only he knew what his sister must be suffering. Myrcella has delivered a healthy prince, and her own health remains well. Wonderful, Cersei said, forcing a smile. And does this prince have a name? Jaime asked. Eddard Stark, Tommen said, and Cersei could no longer keep the false smile on her face. Now spring has arrived, we will of course extend an invitation to the king and queen in the north to visit us here in the capital. Her father spoke calmly. There will be coin set aside for a modest tourney, to celebrate the thaw and of course to show the people that the alliance between the north and the southern kingdoms is as strong and secure as ever. This new prince seals it, ensuring a king with Lannister blood will succeed his father. Though, we pray not for many years, Tommen added, tactfully. Quite, for Myrcella's sake as much as anything else, Jaime agreed, shooting her a dark look. Of course, she forced another smile. Talk then turned to details of the tourney. She barely listened, mind elsewhere entirely. Really, she ought to be happier. Robb Stark would soon be in the capital, and so would her daughter. She wondered if they would bring the child as well. It wouldn't matter either way, they would not be returning north. Robb Stark would not last until the end of the tourney, and Myrcella would of course, naturally, want to remain with her family after such a tragedy. She didn't suppose it would be difficult. Stark would be bound to compete, he was still young after all. All she needed was to find the right opponent, and slip them enough coin. A simple, tragic, accident. Perhaps it was better that Jaime had failed her, this way was far neater, there was no way it could ever be pinned on her. The simplicity of it all almost made her smile, but she kept it masked. She couldn't allow Jaime to become suspicious of her again, he already kept an irritatingly close eye on her. It would complicate her making her arrangements, but it would not be impossible. When preparations began, Jaime would no doubt be expected to aid in them if Tommen were to head out to the tourney ground to survey it. Then Jaime, as head of his Kingsguard, would be obligated to accompany him. Yes, soon enough she would find the time to give him the slip and plan her own spectacle for the tourney. Well, we will discuss further plans when we receive a response to the invitation. Tommen pulled her back from her thoughts. No doubt they will accept, though it will take at least a moon for them to travel here, especially if they bring the prince. We will begin preparations then. Now, if you will excuse me, I must return to my queen. She has been feeling rather delicate due to her condition, and I would make sure she is well tended. Of course, Your Grace, you must send the queen our regards and sympathies, her father said. I hope she feels better soon. Cersei smiled, voice dripping with sweetness. I will accompany you, Your Grace. Jaime rose as Tommen did. Father, sister, he inclined his head to each of them in turn before following Tommen from the door. Only when it closed behind them did her father speak again. Well, it has taken many years, but finally my plan has come to fruition. He sounded satisfied. You mean your plan to sell my daughter to that savage? She spat. She had never forgiven him. Oh, Circe, he chuckled. After all these years I would have thought you would have finally realized that this was the best thing for our family. The Northern Kings may always bear the name Stark, but from now they will always have Lannister blood in their veins, thanks to Myrcella. She has done her duty well. You ought to be proud. Proud? She stared at him incredulously. How could I be? How can you be? Do you have any idea what that savage is subjecting her to? What she must be suffering? Do you not care at all for your only granddaughter? Of course I care, he returned sharply. I'll have you know I take a great interest in her well-being, and I have been assured of it on numerous occasions by the king, as he receives regular correspondence from her, and from Stark. I notice that you cannot boast the same, Circe. I wonder why that might be. The correspondence I have with my daughter is private, she hissed at him. Oh, Circe, he chuckled without humor. Nothing here is private from me. You ought to remember that before you think of doing anything foolish. What do you mean? She asked, to keep her features still as her heart pounded furiously in her chest. Did you really think I would not get it out of Jaime where he really went when he was supposedly reconsidering his future? All pretense was gone now, her father fixing her with a dark look. By all accounts it appears that Myrcella was rather angered by your presumption that she was being mistreated, not that I can blame her. Even think of pulling a stunt like that again, Circe, and you will be banished to the Rock for the rest of your days, and believe me, I will ensure that you have no friends there. I'm sure Tyrion will be more than happy to keep you under close watch. You have no right to threaten me in such a manner. You do not have the authority to send me anywhere, she snarled. Perhaps not, he didn't falter. But Tommen does, and he would. He is not Joffrey, Circe. He has a good head on his shoulders, and should you even think to do something to jeopardize the peace of the kingdoms, he will ensure you can no longer be in any position to influence anything. Do you not think it would be better for Tommen to be king of a united Westeros? She changed tact. In an ideal world, perhaps, but it is not to be, he returned dismissively. And why could it not be? She pressed. If Robb Stark were to die, he began. Then Myrcella would be regent, she interrupted, face flushing. Don't you see? She could give up the throne in her son's name. And you think the Northern Lords would just allow that? He was laughing properly now. They would depose her in a moment, and take control of the child themselves. No, Robb Stark must live, and Myrcella must bear him more sons. You ought to know that a queen needs more than one son to secure the succession. When Stark dies, I want him succeeded by a king who has been raised with his mother's influence, as well as his father's. If that happens too prematurely, then Myrcella will have no say in his future. The boy will be brought up under the influence of the Northern Lords, raised to be their puppet. That, I cannot allow. So, whatever you have planned, Circe, forget it. But she tried once more. Forget it, he snapped formidably. This is my final word, Circe, I suggest you heed it. Chapter 38, XXXIII, Preparations. Notes. I can only apologize for the wait. Some of you may remember that I was expecting a baby. Well, she arrived, and she's been very greedy and taken up almost all my time since her arrival. With all that going on, my brain has been rather mush-like, and writing has been the last thing on my mind, but recently I've picked up my pen again, so to speak. I can't promise that this will be a perfect chapter. Apologies for any glaring errors. I'm not sure that my editing skills are back up to speed yet. I do hope to update with a bit more frequency, but I can't promise miracles. Right now, being mum is my #1 job. Thank you to all of you who have been so patient and are still interested in this story. I will get it finished eventually. Happy Smiley. Chapter text. Myrcella. She had tried to take the news with good grace, a smile on her lips as Robb read out the invitation. It was during council, and it would do no good for her to give them any inclination that all was not well between her and her family. Robb had proceeded to make arrangements with the steward and the maester for the running of Winterfell while they were absent. They would be gone for 3 moons, most likely, what with the journey there and back. There was to be a tourney. Her stomach had churned at that news, and she had eyed Robb as he had talked with his council, wondering if he was thinking of competing. If he was, she would have to talk him out of it. There were plenty other men who could represent the North, there was no need to put himself at risk. She would speak with him about it later, best not to do it now while they were with company. The steward was now making a list, scratching down the names that Rob was reeling off. They were the names of the men and women who would be accompanying them. She doubted very much that any of the lords or their men from further north would make the journey, but Rob named many from settlements south of Winterfell. Representatives from the Sawins, Flints and Marndalis would likely join them as they made the journey. Rob also ordered a letter sent to his uncle Edmure at Riverrun so his Lord Paramount could choose lords and men of his own to add to the party. All in all, it would likely end up being a significant number. While those in the north may not care much for tourneys and knighthoods, they did care for the well-being of their king. Half those who would join them would likely do so to keep an eye on Rob, and for that Myrcella could not help but be grateful. The more watchful, suspicious eyes on her husband the better. It may go some way to ease her own worries. She would have Ned to focus on as well, though she knew she would be able to trust Etta and Jan with her son should she have to be away from him for any reason. A guard would also have to be formed for him, though likely Rob had already thought of that. And from the family, Your Grace. Will it just be you and the Queen? The steward was asking. Myself, the Queen and the Prince, Rob replied, drumming his fingers on the table. I will speak with the rest of the family, but Bran will remain here, and likely my mother as well. I cannot see Arya wishing to join the party, though Rickon may be curious. Best a letter is sent to Sansa and her husband. She will not wish to go, but her husband may wish to come or send men of his own. I will have letters sent out this afternoon, Your Grace, with the finest ravens. The steward bowed his head, rolling up the parchment with the list of names. Thank you, Rob smiled. Myrcella imagined she were the only one who could see it was slightly forced. Is there anything else we can help with, Your Grace? The Maester asked. No, not at this time, Rob smiled again. Then we will take our leave. The Maester gave the steward a pointed look and they both rose from the table, bowing before Rob and Myrcella before taking their leave. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, Myrcella looked to her husband, seeing a thoughtful expression on his face. When will we leave? She asked him. We will wait for those Oliver wishes to send, though it will likely be soon, the end of the week, perhaps, he told her. Well, the sooner we leave the sooner we can return. Myrcella tried to sound unaffected. I know you're worried, he said knowingly, fixing her with a look. Can I ask you something? She bit her lip, wondering how he would take it. I'd welcome it, he returned. Would you not compete in the tourney? She said, keeping her eyes fixed on his. Is that what has you so worried? The tourney? To her surprise he seemed amused. Well, partly. She frowned slightly. So, would you leave the competition to others? Gladly, he smiled. I've never been interested in the pomp of tourneys. I do my fighting on the battlefield, and I'm hopeful that those days are behind me. I'll gladly stay by your side in the crowd, though, I hope you would not object to me placing a wager or two. Of course not. A smile came to her own face now, one of relief more than anything. I don't suppose Tommen will be competing either, Rob said thoughtfully. Your grandfather would not wish to risk him, and I may go so far as to say that he would rather I not risk my neck either. I'll leave it to those who enjoy the applause. Thank the gods, I thought I may have a harder time convincing you. Myrcella laughed slightly. It will keep you happy, and my mother too, Rob said. What more incentive could I possibly need? You always know the right thing to say. She reached over and caressed the back of his hand for a moment. Well, since you are so pleased with me, would you consent to coming with me to speak with the others about our coming absence? Rob raised a brow. Is this a not so subtle attempt to get me in a room with Arya? She asked him amusedly. Perhaps he looked slightly abashed, and she rolled her eyes. I will gladly come with you, but if she ups and leaves there will be nothing I can do about it, she said. I think her desire to know what's going on will outweigh anything else, Rob assured her. Myrcella was not convinced, but she rose up as Rob did, following him obediently from the council chambers and towards one of the living rooms where the family could often be found at this time of day. Sure enough, when they entered all of the family were present, Arya looking as though she had just come from the tilt yard. Arya dropped her wine cup from her lips as she and Rob entered, her eyes narrowing slightly. I'm glad you're all here, Rob spoke as his sister half opened her mouth, more than likely to utter an excuse to leave. I have had some news that concerns all of us in one way or another. What news? Lady Stark looked anxious. We have been invited to the capital. There is to be a tourney to celebrate the arrival of spring, Rob told them all, and Myrcella saw the color drain from her good mother's face. Myrcella couldn't help but flicker her eyes towards Arya. Their gazes met, and for the first time in a long time she did not see any hostility there. Myrcella arched one of her brows slightly, and gave her an insistent look. Arya inclined her head slightly in response, and Myrcella took a breath, her nerves settling slightly as she turned her attention back to Rob, who was assuring his mother that under no circumstances would he be competing in the tourney. "Can I go?" Rukan asked excitedly. "If you wish it," Rob said, slightly stiffly. "I'd love to see a tourney," he grinned. "You will observe only, promise me," his mother said sternly, giving him a sharp look. "I promise." Rukan seemed happy enough to obey. "Arya." Rob looked slightly apprehensive as he addressed his sister. "I'm coming," she said. "Are you sure?" Rob's brow furrowed. "I'll only worry if I'm not there," she shrugged. "Very well," Rob said. He still looked slightly suspicious but seemed accepting. "Then you both need to make sure your things are packed and ready to go by the end of the week. The sooner we can be on our way the better." "I'll make sure it's done." Lady Stark smiled thinly, and Rob sent her a grateful look. "Thank you," he murmured. "Bran, if you would come to the study with me, there are some things we ought to discuss before I leave. I want Winterfell to still be standing when I return." "Of course." Bran grinned happily, wheeling himself towards the door. Rukan moved to open it and Rob turned his attention back to Myrcella. She quickly put a smile on her face, hoping that he would at least be partially fooled. He raised a skeptical brow but said nothing as he leant in and kissed her cheek softly. "Perhaps you and I should make a start on your packing." Rukan. Lady Stark ushered her youngest son from the room. "It will likely be dinner when I see you. I have much to discuss with Bran," Rob told Myrcella apologetically, but for once she was glad he would be absent for a while. Of course. She squeezed his upper arm. He smiled swiftly before he too left the room, leaving Myrcella stood alone across the room from Arya. It had worked out better than she had imagined. She had thought she would have to make some kind of excuse to extricate herself, and hope that Arya understood her silent messages. Given that they were not bosom friends, it may have been difficult to convey her wishes with a mere look. At least this way there was no way either of them could possibly look suspicious. Everyone was seemingly so distracted by the trip to the capital that they had not even noticed that they were leaving the two women alone in a room together. "You remember what I said?" Arya broke the silence first. "About my mother?" Myrcella raised a brow. "I am not likely to forget." "Are you going to try and talk me out of it?" Arya challenged her. "I could have had Rob leave you behind." "I didn't," Myrcella said, and Arya inclined her head slightly. "There's something you want in return, I'd bet." Arya said perceptively. "I don't want you to get into trouble," Myrcella said seriously. "I don't want Rob to have to suffer your death, because he will, if you're caught, which you no doubt will be, especially if there is no motive." "I have plenty motive," Arya snarled. "Yes," Myrcella snapped slightly. "I know that, but you have to understand that when Rob signed that treaty with my grandfather, they agreed that all past crimes were forgiven. You cannot do anything that would risk the treaty. You would throw all of the kingdoms into another war, and you know it." "What then?" Arya demanded. "Your bitch of a mother has already broken the treaty by plotting Rob's death, surely." "Yes," Myrcella met her eyes fiercely. "But we have no proof." "We need proof. Don't you see?" "Because if we had proof, then," Arya tailed off, an almost excitement in her eyes. "Then any action you took could be justified," Myrcella said calmly. "You won't try and stop me?" Arya looked as though she could not believe her ears. "If you find proof that my mother means to harm Rob while we are at the capital, then I will hand you the blade myself and swear before the Seven and all the court that she deserved what she got," Myrcella said viciously, and Arya nodded slowly. "You really do love him, don't you?" Her good sister was looking at her strangely. "With all my heart," Myrcella confirmed. "And I cannot lose him, especially now we have Ned. The lords will have their men stuck to him all hours of the day," Arya said reassuringly. "Trust me, they won't like him going to the capital, and there is no way they would leave him undefended. My father didn't have enough men. They won't allow Rob to make the same mistake." "I know," Myrcella nodded, "but my mother is devious, and underhand." Well, Arya stepped forward, hesitating a moment before placing a hand on Myrcella's shoulder. We will just have to make sure that we are even more devious, because I am coming back to Winterfell with everyone I leave with. Thank you. Myrcella met her eyes, truly grateful. And you? Arya returned, holding her eyes for another moment before she squeezed her shoulder lightly and turned away, letting herself quietly out of the room as Myrcella let out the breath she had not realized she had been holding. She decided against going to the dining hall for dinner. After her conversation with Arya, she felt too on edge to be in Rob's presence. Instead, she plucked Ned from the nursery and retired to her chambers. Dinner was brought to her, but she just picked at it, her appetite seemingly vanished. Ned fed contentedly from her as she thought carefully about everything that had passed between her and Arya. What both of them had said was enough to be accused of treason. She shuddered slightly. It would do no good to think that. Myrcella had made herself very clear to her good sister there would have to be proof. Would her mother be foolish enough to leave any proof? She almost snorted. It was highly unlikely, but Myrcella had to try. Perhaps if she played the dutiful daughter she could get close enough to discover something herself. Perhaps it would be enough just to keep her mother occupied long enough for Arya to be able to search her chambers. She bit her lip. Arya would be risking so much, and if she were caught, Robb would lose his mind, and if he discovered that Myrcella knew what Arya was planning on doing and said nothing. She swallowed hard. It didn't bear thinking about. Robb would be furious with her. She had seen him furious before, but it had never been directed at her. Somehow she imagined that he would be even more furious should he find out what she and Arya were planning. Perhaps it would be best to speak with Arya, call everything off. It might be best that Arya stay here. She could perhaps find proof of her mother's treachery by herself. She chewed on her lip as she considered it, stopping suddenly as the door of her chambers opened. A smile brightened her face on seeing Robb, which he returned before closing the door behind him. Your absence was noticed at dinner, he said, in an amused tone which told her that he had not been concerned by it. Is it terrible of me to just want some time with Ned before the madness that is likely to engulf us during our time at the capital? She asked him in a teasing tone. It was as close to the truth that she could muster, but Robb seemingly accepted it with ease as he crossed to pour himself some wine. Not terrible, he commented. Would you like some? Please, she replied. Some wine may calm her jangled nerves. Who noted my absence, aside from you, of course, she smiled as he turned towards her. Well, aside from me, he grinned, handing her a cup of wine as she shifted Ned so she could cradle him in one arm. My mother was worrying about you. Worrying? Myrcella repeated with a slight frown. Oh, you know my mother, he shrugged before taking a drink. She's not happy unless she has something to worry about. In all honesty, I would have thought she'd be more worried about Arya's decision to come with us. Yes, she said carefully. That was quite a surprise. It is and it isn't, he shrugged again. You know what Arya is like, quite possibly the most paranoid woman I have ever met. She would, of course, be fretting the entire time we were away and no doubt end up driving my mother mad. Well, perhaps that is why your mother is unconcerned. She knows it will make her life easier, Myrcella commented, and Robb chuckled lightly in response. Are you worried about going? He asked her seriously after a few moments of comfortable silence. In some respects, she admitted. Though, I am hoping seeing Tommen, and she hesitated for a moment, and my uncles, will outweigh any displeasure I will feel on being in my mother's presence again. You know, he shifted slightly in his chair. She is your mother. If you did want to, I don't know, mend bridges, I wouldn't be angry. You're sweet to say so, Myrcella smiled at him. But my mother has entirely burned any bridges that would lead her back into my life. I will be civil publicly, but aside from that I cannot imagine she will want to be in my presence any more than I wish to be in hers. Very well, Robb leaned back in his chair. I will say no more about it. Thank you, she smiled in relief, hoping that he would indeed keep his word. Myrcella could hear a commotion out in the courtyard as she folded another of her dresses into her trunk. Robb had treated her to 3 new silk gowns for the capital as it would be warmer there, though she was also packing furs for the journey. The snows had melted for the most part, though there were still patches stubbornly lingering, and Robb thought it likely they would not see unblemished landscape until they were well into the riverlands. She wandered to the window, glancing at Ned to make sure he was still soundly sleeping in his cradle as she moved to pull one of the drapes to the side. A small smile graced her lips as she noted the free sigil on the lapels of a few of the men milling about the carriage in the courtyard. From that she could only gather that Oliver and his men had arrived, though she could not think why he would have brought a carriage, unless. Giggling accompanied the soft knocking on the door and her smile widened. She hurried to open the door, little hands coming to clamp around her knees as little Bethany barreled into her. The laugh that escaped her lips as she bent to pull the little girl up into her arms. "By the gods, you have grown, we did not know you were coming," she exclaimed. "Surprise!" Bethany screeched, just as Ursula caught sight of Sansa rounding the corner. Rhea, who had been a babe in arms the last time Ursula had seen her, now perched on her hip and grinning widely. "A surprise indeed," Ursula agreed, kissing Bethany's cheek before lowering her back to the ground and moving to embrace her good sister. "It has been far too long since I have seen you, thank you so much for coming." She hugged her tightly for a long moment. "Well, with Oliver going to the capital with you, I couldn't pass the opportunity to see you all for a few days before you leave." Sansa smiled. "Once you return we will have to arrange for a longer visit, though I may stay a little while with Mother after you leave. Anyway, forget all that now, where is my nephew?" Her eyes were sparkling as she asked the question and Ursula couldn't help but laugh slightly. "He's just through here." She gestured for Sansa and her daughters to enter her chambers before her. "Though, you may have to wait to hold him as he's still sleeping. I'd wager it will not be long before he wakes though. If he has slept through Bethany's arrival then he must be a wonderful sleeper," Sansa said wryly, shooting her daughter a meaningful look before she approached the cradle, her stern expression softening at once as she gazed at her nephew for the first time. "Oh, Ursula," her voice cracked slightly. "Oh, he is so beautiful, gosh, he is so much like Rob. More like him every day, it seems." Ursula could not help but smile widely. "I forget how tiny they are, mine seem so huge in comparison," Sansa replied. "Well, perhaps you will have to have another to remind yourself," Ursula said teasingly. "Yes." Sansa rolled her eyes. "I suppose I ought to think about providing my husband with an heir." "Home, perhaps," Ursula returned as another knock sounded on the door. "Come in," she called. "I'm not interrupting, am I?" Oliver popped his head around the door in the next moment. "Of course not." Ursula smiled at him, "it's good to see you again." "And you, my queen," he smiled in return. "I've come to relieve you of the children, their grandmother is rather desperate to see them." "Yes, you mustn't keep her waiting any longer," Sansa said, moving to pass Rhea into her husband's arms and ushering Bethany to accompany her father. "Go on now, the pair of you be good, I'll be along in just a moment after I've helped Ursula finish her packing." "I'll let them know you won't be long," Oliver said, kissing her cheek before following Bethany out, the door closing firmly behind the three of them. "You're helping me pack?" Ursula turned to Sansa with a raised brow. "I was just hoping to speak with you alone for a moment," Sansa said, her expression serious. "Is something wrong?" Ursula asked her, her stomach churning uncomfortably. "You tell me." Sansa folded her arms. "What in the seven hells is Rob thinking, allowing Arya to go to the capital? Surely you, of all people, can see what a horrible idea that is." "We're not concerned, and there's no reason you should be either." Ursula tried a smile. "Nice try." Sansa snorted. "You know damn well that she still hungers for revenge. There is no way she won't try anything, and if she does it will upset this balance we have somehow managed to achieve with the southern kingdoms. I know about her list. Half your family are on it, you should be more worried than anyone else." "List?" Ursula frowned. Joffrey. Sansa held up one finger. Cersei. Another went up. Eileen Payne. Another. Meryn Trant. Yet another. "They are to name but a few, those who will no doubt be at the capital," Sansa said seriously. She added the Kingslayer, when she found out the truth about what happened to Bran. "That's how I know about her list." She would chant it every night on the way back to Winterfell after she was delivered back to Robb. "I shared a tent with her. I never told anyone else about her list, I never even told her that I heard her, but I did. I know she means it, Mycella. You can't take her to the capital, she will ruin everything." "By the gods." Ursula closed her eyes momentarily. "Do you see?" Sansa asked. "I see," she agreed, nodding slightly. "But, we cannot just change our minds now and leave her behind, it would seem strange. There will be plenty of men in our party and I can ensure that someone is discreetly watching her at all times. This is Arya we're talking about, Sansa stressed. Do you not think she will know exactly how to evade whatever guard you place on her? She will know in an instant if she is being tailed. Myrcella, please, we have peace. We have families, we are happy. Please, you cannot let anything jeopardize that. Arya doesn't have what we have, she doesn't understand how devastating it would be to lose it, all she can think of is her own vengeance. It has blinded her for so long, Myrcella, you cannot give her the chance to bring our peace crashing down around us. Sansa, I don't want an end to peace, Myrcella said calmly, and neither does Arya. I know how she feels about my family and we have spoken at length about it. As much as she hates them, she would not put Robb or his rule at risk. I trust that she will do the right thing when we are at the capital, otherwise I would already have put a stop to her accompanying us. Trust me, she only wishes to go so she does not have to stay here and fret about Robb's safety, that's all. I wish I could believe that. Sansa worried at her bottom lip. I know what I'm doing. Myrcella held her eyes, and eventually the other woman sighed in what she recognized as defeat. Very well, Sansa said tiredly. I see I will not talk you out of it, but I hope you have taken everything I have said into consideration. If anything happens, Myrcella, it will be on your head. The end.